Greetings and salutations, all you beautiful souls. Welcome to League Unlock. It is another special episode as we're counting down the 5 best support players of all time. You gotta show some love to the support players. They constantly are criminally underrated. They're never getting honor in the post-game lobbies. It's always about the AD carry, getting all the kills or stealing all the kills, but we've got to acknowledge and show some support to those players that are supporting them and really making them look a whole lot better than they actually are. And of course, there have been some fantastic support players around throughout the history of League of Legends, and it's probably the role that has developed and changed the most over the 9-year, 10-year now coming up to course of League of Legends. So comparing different eras gets a little bit tricky, but we will be doing our best to navigate through the different seasons and years that we played. Before we get to the actual list, of course, we got to give some honorable shout outs to a couple of players who came just a little bit short of making it into that top 5 category. And we got to start with the captain from Europe. It is Yellowstar, the king of Fnatic. Again, with his career, we completely forget about his time on TSM because that was forgettable, even though they did get to the spring finals. But of course, a bunch of different roster iterations for Fnatic. Yellowstar was there. The man has 5 EU LCS titles, 4 of them as a support. That very first one came as an AD carry. Obviously, his main claim to fame is basically hand-picking that 2015 roster that went undefeated. He won MVP in Europe that year. He brought over Huni and Reignover, which had tons of question marks, and that team absolutely delivered, and they even delivered on the international stage at MSI and the World Championship in 2015. He was most known for those engaged supports, but also loved the Janna. I mean, it was Annie he was engaging, Nautilus he was engaging fights, or playing Janna, Morgana, something like that, and just making sure that Reckless is safe at all times. The fact that we didn't really see him play after Season 6, and I think the height or the peak for him was that 2015 stint, and really longevity. I mean, he definitely has the achievements with 5 LCS titles, and he performed internationally, but I think the peak performance level just isn't quite there compared to the rest, the players that are actually on this list. And I mean, that's no knock on Yellowstar. The top 5 are obviously absolutely stacked. A couple other guys are Mako and Sword Art, who have been around for a very long time. Sword Art always performing at international events when he's on Flash Wolves, and his time on Suning maybe hasn't quite lived up to the super team hype that we expected from them, but nonetheless, Sword Art has been one of the best supports in the world for multiple years, and Mako has been a staple on EDG with different bottom laners. Doesn't matter if it's Deft coming in there. He helped groom iBoy into a, at times, very solid AD carry. So he's played with a bunch of different guys in the bottom lane. But again, both of them come up just a little bit short from making the top 5 list. This time around, the first man who does have the honor of making that list is North America's latest and greatest former Dignitas AD carry, CoreJJ. What an interesting career he's had to follow. Obviously, he started out as an AD carry challenger in the Korean scene, and then he came over to North America because we know NA loves importing Koreans. He disappointed big time on Dignitas. He switches, he role swaps to support, goes over to Samsung Galaxy, and all of a sudden becomes a top 3 support in Korea, and most of the time top 3 in the world ever since 2016 when he went over there. So that is a long time we've been talking about him as a world-class AD carry, and I think even during the times when you saw Gen G struggling, it was Ruler and CoreJJ that were the staple and consistent force for them. They were representing at the Asian Games. They were brought over there, and again, deservedly so. I think that CoreJJ has just been unbelievably consistent through different metas. He's the one guy, most support players, you hear them talking about, oh yeah, but then he's got to play Tahm Kench, who even though is theoretically a brain-dead champion, a lot of guys struggle on that pick, but CoreJJ, quite possibly the best Tahm Kench, or one of the best Tahm Kenches of all time. He just is so comfortable on that champion. Him and Ruler, again, he just paired so perfectly with him. And when he came over to North America, playing with Doublelift, he did not miss a beat whatsoever. His first split in North America, all he does is win a championship, finish first in the regular season, get an MVP under his belt. There's a lot of times where imports do not live up to the hype at all when it comes to coming over to North America, but CoreJJ absolutely delivered on the hype and has continued to do that for Team Liquid, actually giving them international success, and I think a lot of that is because of the experience that he brings. And well, LCK titles may not actually be there on his resume. I think what he helped guide Samsung doing in the Gauntlet and Gen G as well. I mean, winning the Gauntlet is almost more impressive. No, well, it's not more impressive than winning an LCK title, but it is comparable because it is kind of the last chance saloon for some of the best teams in Korea, and 3 years in a row, time again, CoreJJ helped lead Samsung or Gen G through that Gauntlet run to get to Worlds. Obviously 2018, not a great feeling or not a great ending to that World Championship run, but he does have a world title under his belt, and we know that that's a lot more important than an LCK title. So CoreJJ, I mean, again, an incredible career to follow because of how big the role swap changed the entire trajectory of what his professional playing days were going to be. And he hasn't had to play with that many AD carries, which again is something we're going to take into mind and consideration when we're looking at a lot of the other supports on this list. CoreJJ probably played with the least amount. No, that's not true. Spoilers to some of the other guys, but he hasn't played with that many. Obviously, Ruler and Doublelift basically the main guys he's played with the entirety of his career. Nonetheless, he has lived up to the hype in North America and truly came to another level when he role swapped in Korea. So CoreJJ, deservedly so, comes in at number 5 on the best supports of all time. Coming up after the break, how important is winning to be on this list? Well, it turns out it is very important when you're considering someone's all-time ranking. We are back, you beautiful scallywags, to another episode of League Unlocked. We're continuing our countdown for the 5 best support players of all time. We've now reached the top 4, and as is the theme with pretty much any of these top 5 positional countdowns, you know that there are going to be a whole lot of Korean representatives because if you haven't watched the entire course of history over competitive League of Legends, Korea throughout the years has been far and away the most dominant region, even including their performance at Season 8 Worlds. They've still been the best region, and that's why they have the most players on all of these lists. With that being said, at number 4, you've got to account for winning and titles when you're talking about all-time players, and Wolf from SKT, formerly of SKT, has done a whole lot of winning, as anyone associated with that roster has. But as you recall, the main players and staple guys throughout that entire run of 2015 to 2018 on SKT, the 3 main consistents were Faker, Bang, and Wolf. And Wolf, you know, he got poo-pooed on a lot throughout his career, especially towards the end of it when SKT, or the end of it on SKT, which is when they had their huge slumps. And yes, he did not perform up to that same level. And yes, they had an absolutely stacked roster from 2015 to 2017. But there's no doubt that that roster was stacked because they had a top 3 player at pretty much every position in the entire world. So yes, he has all the career accolades there. He has a disgusting win percentage on Alistar, one of the staple picks that he played throughout the entirety of his career. Almost 100 games, and you're rocking a 75% win rate. That is pretty darn disgusting, and he's still been performing at a high level in the Turkish League, which is where he went to the TCL after his 2018 run with SKT. But at their very peak, I think people criminally underrated SKT's bottom lane. Yes, Prey and Gorilla maybe probably better than them, even in their heyday, but Bang and Wolf were absolutely consistent and never an issue, never a liability for SKT. They were constantly going toe-to-toe with the other world-class bottom lanes, and Wolf single-handedly a lot of games for SKT. In particular, you always hear about the call and a lot of these wombo combo crazy team fight changing plays. It's always Faker that for whatever reason is getting the attention, but most of the time it was Wolf setting them up on whatever champion that he was on. As is a good support, he was always willing to die for his AD carry to make sure that he gets to live and have a better KDA so that he can reap all the praise, and the support is just there as a dying effort or a dying bodyguard for them. But mechanically, Wolf was obviously absolutely incredible. Again, these guys, most of these players have been around for so long that you've got to account for adapting to different metas, because the champion picks, especially on support, are so completely different. You're seeing these highlights, it's Alistar, it's Zyra, it's switching between these huge, heavy bruiser supports to these mages that you're just sitting back and kind of shielding your AD carry. He's played a lot of Janna, he's played a lot of Karma. He knows what it's like to sit there and shield bang so that he can pop off. He remembers the Ardent Sensor meta of 2017, but Wolf for so long was the key engage for SKT. Even didn't matter which jungler was playing, whether it was Blank, Peanut, or Bengi, it was Wolf who was getting things started for these team fights, and Wolf's making that call to either start or run the heck away from any given team fight. I know maybe we were never talking about Wolf as the best support in the world at any time throughout his career, but he was always around in that top 3 during that 3-year peak for SKT, and obviously being a part of the winningest organization of all time definitely helps to get you to that number 4 spot. Number 3 on our list comes in as maybe the most iconic support player of all time, and where Wolf has all the achievements and all the titles. This guy doesn't necessarily have those accolades to back up his career, but he is the pioneer for the position, and your boy Madlife completely revolutionized how support is played and really made people realize, oh, this role can actually be fun. You can actually carry from here and actually play a lot of these fun champions, and it's not just sitting back there shielding, playing Soraka. His Thresh obviously completely changed the game, and people realized, oh wow, the kit that this champion has is completely game-changing. And anytime you have a specific play named after you, well, all of a sudden you're approaching Hall of Fame territory, where you're talking about this guy as an absolute legend. Anytime you're predicting a flash or landing an absolutely disgusting hook, everyone will be calling it a Madlife, because he was one of the first guys to do it. I think really in season 2 and 3, this guy's mechanics were just basically at a level that we see players reach now. And when you have that in seasons 2 and 3, well, it's absolutely disgusting, and he's clearly the best support in the world at that point. I think pre-Faker, you even heard guys like Monte Cristo talking about Madlife being the best player on the planet, before obviously the unkillable Demon King came in and took over that role. But early on, and again, it's hard to judge the early days of League as opposed to now, because the game has evolved and changed so much. But for so many, even after Season 3, obviously the peak of Madlife was Season 2 on Azubu Frost, and heading in the majority of Season 3 on CJ Entis, and people like to think that that's it. After that, he was washed up and trash, but that's not the case. CJ Entis, they did have some good splits where they were competing at international events. There was IEM where they were making some noise, and they were even in a couple of finals around the 2015 and even 2016 era and season. They were still competing, and Madlife was the only one who was hanging out from the MIG days way back in 2012, even 2011. He was the only remaining player from those rosters. The Azubu Frost team from Season 2 that went to the World Finals, he was the only remaining member that was still performing at a high level. Yes, Shy was still around, and he played, they played together until 2016, but Madlife was still playing at a world-class level for the majority of these splits. And then, of course, you remember how his career ended. As all great Koreans, it seems to come to an end in the NA Challenger scene, and even he couldn't drag Goldcoin United into the LCS, but he still had some highlight plays there. But Madlife, you've really got to account for what he did in the early days, and really just making people see that support can actually be fun. You can carry your AD carry a lot more than the AD carry actually can in that bottom lane during the laning phase. And as we know now, it's all about the supports in that early game to kind of hold your hand of your diva AD carry and get them through that laning phase. And Madlife was one of the all-time greats and one of the first guys to be able to get it done. There's been a lot of Thresh Princes over the years, but it was Madlife who was the original man who pioneered that champion and piloted it to absolute perfection. I'm a little bit devastated that we haven't been able to see him on the pro stage now with a champion like Pyke, who is so similar to Thresh, just has so many mechanical outplays and different gameplay mechanics. I would love to see Madlife back on the stage playing Pyke, but nonetheless, he'll be remembered forever because, again, he has an entire skill set and move list named after him in the Madlife. Coming up after the break, we're on to the top 2, and Madlife was the great innovator, but these guys took it to the next level after him. We are back. This is League Unlocked, continuing the countdown of the greatest supports of all time because you got to pay a little respect to the forgotten heroes. Again, of the bottom lane, we have reached the top 2, and obviously, if they're not household names to you by now, then you haven't been watching the game for more than about a week. Top 2. These guys have been around. Again, if you're in the top 2, you've got to have longevity. You've got to have peak performance that has stretched multiple, and I mean multiple seasons, and both of these guys have done that. Despite some of their perhaps recent play, you wouldn't expect them to be top 2, but historically, come on, these guys have to be here. We got to start with Gorilla, and we're not talking about Misfits Gorilla because that is a shell of his former self and what we saw in the early career and mid-career, peak career. Every career that wasn't on Misfits, Gorilla was a world-class support pretty much ever since he debuted, and his time with Najin Shield back in 2014. This is a guy who was always being spoken about as one of the best supports in the world and really one of the greatest innovators when it comes to shaping the meta in terms of support picks. 3 LCK titles. He's been a world finalist, a world semifinalist. Obviously, both of those runs came to an end at the hands of the eventual champions in SK Telecom. The MSI run at Kingzone, yes, there has been some international disappointment associated with Gorilla, but again, those 2 world championships, they were far and away the second best team at the event on the different Tigers rosters, and it just so happened that SKT was the best team in the world. They went head-to-head against them both times. I think if they were on opposite sides of the bracket, they're probably in the finals again in 2016. But that series against SKT, of course, had the misfortune pick in the bottom lane, which completely shifted the series. Obviously, SKT was not expecting whatsoever, ended up forcing a ban out of them because it just completely destroyed that Zyra matchup. So that kind of theory crafting is something that he did throughout the entirety of his career. In 2014, nobody was really playing Janna at all, and Gorilla started playing it and became, oh wow, this pick is actually still pretty insane. So everyone else started picking it up. He's always not only adapted to whatever metas around, but again, he has shaped it with some interesting picks. One of the all-time minds when it comes to pick ban, specifically in that bottom lane. And I mean, him and Prey, obviously, whenever they came together on those Coup Tiger rosters, they quickly became one of the most feared and consistent bottom lanes in the history of the game and continue. I mean, if you're ranking bot lanes of all time and bot duos, they're probably up there as number 1. Prayrilla were absolutely incredible on Longzhu, Kingzone. You forget before Kingzone and Longzhu actually became a solid team and an LCK champion, it was Prey and Gorilla with kind of some suspect players around them, and they still performed at a decent level. Obviously not championship level, but he's helped. It's helped had a veteran guy like Prey in the bottom lane with him for so long, and it's a little disappointing that him and Hans Sama didn't quite work out to the level that you were maybe expecting, but recency bias completely out the window and aside. Gorilla is one of the best supports of all time. In fact, he is the second best support of all time, and don't disrespect his name. No crying Gorilla pictures here because, again, number 2 on this list. And number 1, it's hard to make any argument against him. It's about as safe a number 1 as Faker in the mid lane. It is Mata he's played on so many different teams, and he's won on so many different teams. We talked about what Mad Life did for completely revolutionizing the role of support. Well, Mata just added on to that and kind of revolutionized how you play League of Legends, and that emphasis on vision that we saw out of Samsung White in 2014 is how they just completely suffocated the rest of the competition to completely dominate their way to that World Championship win. And obviously, Mata got MVP for that entire event. And it's pretty rare to be talking about a support getting MVP for an entire international event when it comes to Worlds, and that's exactly what he did. And he still played some Janna in a lot of that because our boy Gorilla helped make that a meta pick in that same era. And he's won the LCK. Let's see, he's won it on MVP Ozone. He's won it on Samsung White. He's won it on KT. He's won it on SKT. A whole bunch of different rosters, entirely different. And he even won an LPL title with RNG. If you're talking about playing with different bottom laners, someone like Wolf and CoreJJ, they've played with pretty much 2 for the entirety of their career. Mata made a guy like Whoosh on RNG. That's right, they won. Royal Never Give Up won their title with Mata not playing with Uzi at that point. It was still Whoosh in the spring split. So that has got to be credit to him, because you saw some highly questionable plays from Whoosh throughout his career. And where is he now? That's right. And Mata helped make him look like a top-tier AD carry. So Mata, the fact that he's done it with so many different teams, he's almost always the captain of whatever squad he's been, the main shot caller, and obviously getting benched at times on SKT. Again, recency bias here throughout his entire career. Even if he's getting benched, it doesn't matter, because the longevity is there from season 3 to season 9, basically. Even on Vici Gaming in 2015, he's borderline trolling. He's not borderline, he's straight up trolling by picking things like Jace support. If you remove that season from his career, then he has been a world-class support, and I think you're talking about him again, top 3, top 2 for the entirety, season 3, season 4, season 6, season 7, season 8. He's always been there, and again, I think you're talking about him right there with Mad Life in terms of revolutionizing the support role, because he was the guy running around with Dandy on Samsung White and really roaming and taking over, making sure your other lanes are winning. He was the first, one of the first supports to really master doing that and saying goodbye to Imp. You can hang out in the bottom lane 1v2. I'm going to go get our mid lane fed. I'm going to go get our jungler fed. And I'm going to get the top laner fed, because sometimes your tanks need a little bit of love as well. So just overall map movement and vision control is something that Mata perfected and continues to have a heavy emphasis on. And obviously, you look at now how important vision score and vision control is across all facets of pro play. A lot of that comes from the boys on Samsung White, and Mata specifically. So he's an absolute revolutionary right there with Mad Life, and it's hard to argue against him being the greatest support in the history of the game, and I don't know if anyone will ever be able to go over him. That's it today for League Unlocked. My name's Eric. Thank you guys for hanging out, and we'll catch you on the Flippity Flip.